The idea of making your video game console output significantly better video quality typically would associate itself with soldering irons, tiny solder points, and a qualified installer. While some plug-and-play solutions may exist, the idea of a universal plug-and-play solution seems like magic.
With a new nickname.
Oh, that is. It's so good.
I got a new nickname.
So
The Magic Man. Now you see me? Now you don't.
That is the stupidest nickname I've ever heard.
The Mcable from Marseille promises magic in the form of a built-in anti-aliasing algorithm created specifically to clean up video game graphics. So with an Mcable in hand, let's have a look and see how it does with the N64, Gamecube, Sega Dreamcast, and the Nintendo Switch. But these aren't your average retro gaming consoles. These have all been modified with HDMI mods for each respective system. Let's see how the Mcable does. Before we get started, just want to say a quick thank you to Marseille for sending out this test cable for me to go ahead and take a look at today and show you guys here. I know a lot of you guys have been asking about it, and so I'm very thankful to them for sending one my way to review. While the cable was sent to me, all thoughts and opinions are my own, and no one has reviewed any of this before I put this out there. The other thing I want to put out there is everyone's going to have their own thoughts and biases when it comes time to any kind of retro gaming. Some people like extra crispy pixels, and others are okay with a softer image. For whatever it's worth, my personal opinion is I like razor sharp pixels. Having said that, I do not think that this would be a device that I would use on anything prior to the 16-bit generation. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's appropriate for the 16-bit generation either. And also, as it relates to how I'm going to review this, just keep some of those things in mind, as now you know where my bias tends to lie on the matter. But with this thing fully unboxed, the packaging looks great. We're going to take a quick look at the website, and we're going to take a look at some of the resolutions that the cable will handle, as well as some of the scaling that it will do with the given input resolution. So first thing I want to take a look at N64. This is a specific N64 that I've showed off on the channel before. Make sure you check out the card in the upper right hand corner to see all the modifications done to this one. But the most crucial mod is it has the Ultra HDMI mod. What you're taking a look at right now is the instruction manual for it. The key thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the Ultra HDMI mod is when you're using 460p, you lose all of the other HDMI features that it has. This includes things like video deblur, which, let's be honest, if you have it, you're going to want that on. However, I went ahead and kicked it into 480p mode anyway, and what I noticed is this: it really changed the aspect ratio when it scaled the image from 480p to 1080p. Considering this and the previously mentioned enhanced features, we're going to go ahead and use 1080p as our baseline for the Ultra HDMI mod. I did try 720p as well, but didn't notice an appreciable difference between the two. So what you're looking at is Mario 64 through the Ultra HDMI in 1080p with no Mcable. So now we'll switch over to the Mcable, and again this is in 1080p through the Mcable. And what you're probably going to notice right away is there's not a huge appreciable difference here. But when I cut over side by side, and you can see no Mcable on the left, Mcable on the right, what I did tend to notice, at least when I was playing, and a little bit here, probably not as obvious here, but when I was playing it felt like the colors were a little bit brighter with the Mcable. So I also wanted to take a look at Mario Kart 64. I thought this was a perfect game to look at, since we know that all these sprites are effectively just 2D. So I thought that maybe we could get a little bit unique perspective looking at 2D sprites versus 3D images. Sure enough, the Mcable actually went ahead and cleaned up some of the sprites on the actual racers themselves. It's a little bit hard to tell when everything's moving in fast motion like this, but take a look at the following still. As we zoom way in, you can see on the left side, the non-Mcable is definitely more blurry than with the Mcable. Next, let's have us a look at the Gamecube. But this isn't any Gamecube. This is my Metroid Prime 4 themed Gamecube. If you guys missed this video, make sure you check out the card in the upper right hand corner. This is an awesome build. So I thought Luigi's Mansion would be absolutely perfect. This intro scene is absolutely a jaggy mess. so I thought it would be perfect. Now we're looking at this through the GC Dual, which uses GC video and outputs a 480p resolution. As we flip over to the Mcable, there's a couple things I noticed right away. First of all, it definitely cleaned up some of those rough edges. However, there was an unintended side effect. Well, two actually. One, it introduced some shimmer. And number two, if you look at it, they actually offset the aspect ratio, and it's actually different. You can tell by the black bars on the side. The one with no Mcable, which is the proper aspect ratio, is a larger black bar than with an Mcable. To make sure this wasn't exclusive to Luigi's Mansion, I popped in Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader by Factor 5, which is a fantastic Star Wars game. And really, come on guys, Factor 5, we need a sequel on this. But anyway, we're going to flip between HDMI and HDMI with the Mcable, and you're going to notice a very similar effect here as we go between side by side, and that is the aspect ratio is going to be wrong again. This is a little bit disappointing, mostly because for me it's important to have pixel perfect aspect ratio. Next up's the Dreamcast with the DC HDMI. This console's an absolute beast. Check out the card in the upper right hand corner if you have missed the video on it. So before we go ahead and get into it, just wanted to take a look at the GitHub page for the DC HDMI just to see what the various output resolutions are and what they actually do. So VGA mode would be pixel perfect output, and 1080p represents 2 times VGA within a 1080p window. I started by pairing the Mcable with the DC HDMI and VGA and noticed that it was distorting the aspect ratio. So I went ahead and set it to 1080p, and all video capture will be in 1080p. The game you're looking at is Crazy Taxi 2, and when it came to the comparison between Mcable and non-Mcable, I really didn't notice much of a difference when playing the game, and even at looking at various stills I didn't notice much of a difference at all. Now, next up is Soulcalibur, and I did notice a pretty decent difference here, and specifically it had to do with the colors. As you can see on the right, the Mcable, the color looks slightly different than the non-Mcable. In terms of actual smoothing effects, I really didn't notice very much there. But I did notice one interesting anomaly. As you take a look at this screenshot here, you've got the Mcable on the right and the non-Mcable on the left. If you take a look, it actually kind of almost distorted some of the very solid black lines here as it went through the intro of Soulcalibur 2. One final thing to note here, I did not try the experimental DC HDMI firmware, which has the H2X filter built into it. I just didn't get around to testing it, so unfortunately I can't do that comparison. So as we move on to the Nintendo Switch, to me this is where the Mcable really starts to shine. Now I've got Cuphead loaded up here, and while I will say it's probably not intended for a 2D game like this, even still, at least on my TV and while I was playing the game, I could notice a difference in color, and I thought the color out the Mcable looked better than with my standard HDMI cable. Again, probably a little bit hard to see here, but I thought the reds and the blues were a lot more vibrant and just looked a lot better in general. Taking a look at Yoshi's Crafted World, to me this is the ideal fact and circumstance for something like the Mcable. This game is made in Unreal Engine 4 and runs at 60 frames per second. However, to get that 60 FPS, Nintendo had to make certain sacrifices, and those sacrifices come predominantly in the visual quality of the game. So something like the Mcable goes a long way to help smooth out the image and make it look a lot better. As a matter of fact, I'd go a little step further to say that the Mcable works absolutely fantastic with some of the newer systems. To me, it is a much better use case than with the retro systems. Just to kind of demonstrate this a little bit further, I've got a couple still images here where we zoom in on some of the background elements of the game, and in there you can clearly see that the Mcable is doing a much better job of smoothing those out as opposed to the normal non-Mcable version. So overall, what do I think about the Mcable? Well, I will say that I think for the more modern consoles, I think it's something that actually is pretty good. I do like the fact that it helps with the Switch in particular, because the Switch really does suffer from bad aliasing. So it's nice to see that get cleaned up and smoothed out some. As for some of the retro consoles, well, I mean, to be completely fair, I'm not even doing it in the way that, Marseille recommends. I'm using highly upgraded systems with already, pixel perfect output via HDMI, so it's probably not the right way to look at it. However, I'm also not a fan of the fact that it distorts the aspect ratio of the game and it adds shimmer. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this review, and make sure you guys check out some of those other videos I discussed earlier, specifically the Ultra HDMI mod on the N64 and that absolutely tricked out GameCube. But anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review. Don't forget to give me a comment, like, and a subscribe, and I'll catch you guys for the next one here soon.